Well, for years we've known Pierre Poilievre as the sharp-tongued attack dog of the Conservative Party, but lately we're seeing a different side, softer lighting, no glasses, and a somewhat kinder approach. Is this genuine evolution or just a strategic coat of paint? And Eddie, there has been a very definite difference in his whole demeanor during his trip to the UK and Germany and through the US in the past week. Very, very, very different. And then, of course, finally appearing on the Joe Rogan podcast, the most popular podcast in the world. He originally last year during the campaign turned it down. This year, he reached out himself and said, okay, I'll come on, and went on almost 2.5 hours and did a really good job, didn't fall into any of the traps that Rogan was setting. He just worked around it and did an admirable job. Then yesterday in the House of Commons, he was back, and here is near the beginning of the speech that he gave in the House yesterday.
Americans understand that it is in our interest as a continent for our two separate countries to, while they maintain their sovereignty, to work collaboratively to make us both richer, stronger, and safer. And I shall say that I kept the Prime Minister well informed of all these developments while I was abroad, and I look forward to meeting with him to report on my findings, to compare notes, and offer recommendations on how Canada can become stronger at home, more affordable at home, so that we have the leverage abroad to achieve tariff-free trade with our American partners.
Now you'll notice that he made mention of the fact again, and he did a couple of times in scrums with reporters as well, that he did keep the Prime Minister informed as to what he was doing, what he was hearing, all the time texting back and forth. They've become text buddies, apparently. And of course, as he said, he plans to give a full report to the Prime Minister, meet with him sometime this week and give a full report. That's a whole different tone that you're hearing, you're even feeling, you're seeing. Even his facial expressions are different. The angry look seems to be gone. Mm-hmm. And it's a somewhat more of a compassionate look. He's serious about his business that he has to conduct, but still he's notched down at least a couple of notches. At least that's what I'm seeing in watching him in some of the clips that I saw from his trips. The same idea. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch a lot of Pierre while you've been away, but I don't know. Maybe you're sensing it and as well.
Well, you know what, Gary? I'll say it, and I've said it, and I'll say it again. Would the real Pierre Poilievre please stand up? This is something that you and I have discussed often. I think both you and I have been both critical and also gave accolades where they were due. And the last 2 weeks, I'd be very, very hard pressed, Gary, to not give the man accolades. Well, first of all, two points. My first reaction to the leader of an opposition of a country going around the world or seeing our neighbors and having discussions about Canada's plans and programs. Personally, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I really don't feel that's quite the correct thing to do, unless he's acting directly under the behest and request of the leader of the country. So that's just how I feel about it. But I'll tell you what, Pierre Poilievre, with his trip out to Europe, him going through Motor City, and then spending time on the Joe Rogan show, I really have to tell you, from the clips and what I have actually seen and read over the last couple of weeks, you know what? where was this format of Pierre Poilievre, A, during the election, B, during the initial part of Parliament in session, when he actually won his seat in Alberta? I just didn't see this man. And I think you're absolutely right, Gary, in terms of his body language, both while he was on the road and being interviewed on the road, again, while being interviewed by Joe Rogan. And you saw that he tried to set a few traps, like you'd said. He didn't fall for them, and he really, really answered the direct, tough questions with pride as a Canadian, first and foremost. And you know what? And with an ease, Gary, it was an ease that I've never seen in him. He looked comfortable. Even this clip that you just showed about the last question period in Parliament, I've never seen him at such ease, and it looked so natural, Gary. It didn't look forced. Now, is this the real Pierre Poilievre from now moving forward, and maybe the man finally came out of his shell? As opposed to coming out and loving every microphone he sees and running to every camera he sees for his 15-second blurb. I really hope so. Just based on what I've seen the last 2 weeks, I really have some sense of hope that this man has actually learned his lesson and his natural self is actually coming out. And why is that important? I know to me, Gary, and I've mentioned this very often to you, when you have somebody who wants to be the leader of my country, he has to be able to reach me. He has to be able to speak to me, not at me. And this is the first time I've actually really felt that he reached me. And I can be the most difficult people to reach, but he actually spoke to me, both on the Joe Rogan show, what I've seen in his interviews from the media scrums after his visit. I don't know what to say, and I'll circle back. Will the real Pierre Poilievre please stand up? And I'm hoping that this one that's standing in front of me the last couple of weeks is of things yet to come, Gary, to tell you the truth.
Well, there is a very, very solid reason why Poilievre has had to turn it around. First of all, look at the results of last year's federal election and how they had a 25-point lead going into the election campaign. It was starting to taper a bit after Carney won the Liberal leadership. But going into that campaign, they still had between a 20 and 25-point lead, depending on the poll you were reading at the time. And we all know what happened. They turned around and they lost that lead, and the Liberals came roaring back from virtually almost in the same fate as the New Democratic Party, or headed in that direction anyway,
right?
And won the election. Well, they squeaked out a minority win in the election. Now, the best thing the Tories could say was, well, we increased the vote count and our share of the popular vote. But you didn't win the election, and you lost a major lead.
Right.
Poilievre seems now to be, he'd be very quick to turn it around to the positive talking point about, the vote increase and the popularity percentage. But now he seems to have accepted the fact that, yeah, you know what, we lost. Yes, I've lost 3 members across the floor to the Liberals, and I know that there has been more discontent within the caucus in some areas. What really counts now is they're still looking at the polls, and depending on the poll and looking at it from mid-February to just in the last week or so, the Liberals are still out in front by anywhere between 10 and 15 points.
That's considerable.
And building and building in areas like Alberta, for example, they're starting to gain some strength in Alberta, which is hardcore conservative.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that, and really, the Liberals are ahead, and they're ahead, like I say, by about 10 to 15 points. The Conservatives are stuck in the low to mid 30s. As far as percentages are concerned. And of course, the NDP has collapsed into single digits.
Yeah.
And I believe their leader will be announced. Their new leader will be announced. I believe it's this weekend. Anyway, so with the Liberals consistently posting those leads, it's one of those things where he has to come out and start trying new things, because the attack dog style is not resonating at all. And when you get right down to it, when I look at numbers, and I'm just scrolling through some background numbers now, Mark Carney is preferred by 56 to 57% of the people polled. He's preferred as prime minister. Poilievre is sitting in around 22%.
Mm-hmm.
That's a 30-plus point lead for Carney.
Yeah.
That's more than a honeymoon.
Yeah, and
we're almost a year into the mandate after the last year's federal election, and he's got that kind of a lead. Yeah. Normally, the bloom on the rose is starting to fade by now, and especially with everything that's been happening, as far as what the folks south of the border have been doing, and buttons they've been pushing, and everything, and the economy and the impact of the war that they started on the economy. He's still out in front, and even though there have been areas where, we signed a lot of memorandums of understanding, but not a lot has happened since then. And even like the one on the pipeline proposal in Alberta, one of the major projects, they're going to miss their April 1st deadline, or it appears they're going to miss their April 1st deadline of getting all of the agreements in place to get things rolling, to get shovels in the ground.
Yep.
But that's not impacting Carney's popularity at the moment. And I think he got a real boost from his speech in Davos earlier this year. I mean, people, their leaders and business people around the world still talking about that speech.
Yeah.
So I think the real story is that he has, and he's also like the Liberals are picking up some soft NDP voters, like the NDP has been just sort of flailing, and so some of those voters are starting to look at the Liberals, and the Liberals and Carney seem to be more solid and making more sense. So there's that aspect, and even there may be some very progressive conservatives on the conservative side who are looking at Carney, because even the Conservatives have accused Carney of taking their ideas and running with them. So there's that aspect of it as well. And I just want to play one more clip from yesterday with Carney, Poilievre's speech, where he does, after giving his report, if you will, on his trip, he does come back around and does his job as an opposition leader. But really, again, the approach is different.
And though I made a point of not criticizing the Prime Minister on foreign soil, I return here where it is precisely my constitutional obligation to do just that. Not out of any partisan interest, but out of an interest in pursuing the truth. He promised that he would give us the fastest growing economy in the G7. We now have the only shrinking economy in the G7. He promised affordable food. We have the most food inflation in the G7. He promised that we would have a solid economy. We now have the worst housing costs and the highest household debt in the G7 and the second highest unemployment in that group. He said that he would negotiate a win with the presidents. Here we are today. A year later, no win, no deal. Tariffs on aluminum and steel have doubled, and on Canadian lumber, they have tripled. He promised that he would build projects with record speed, and yet his major projects office, which this House rushed into existence in 5 days back in June because the Prime Minister said it was an emergency, has still not approved a single project of any kind almost a year later.
And
what a different delivery.
exactly.
Seriously, yeah.
And the rest of this speech was like that. I didn't see today's question period, and I'm not sure if he was actually in question period and the Prime Minister was there as well. I don't know. But yesterday, when I saw this, I thought, wow, like it is altogether a different Poilievre.
Certainly.
The question, though, that we're all asking, Eddie, is, as you implied earlier, is will the real Poilievre stand up, and how long is it going to last?
Right. And if it does last, my next question is, where the hell have you been?
Yeah.
Right. So you know what, Gary, I think time will tell. I think from some of our previous shows, some of our viewers had commented during the show and while they were watching the video clips, does leopard change its spots? And I think, you know what, that'll come out the next month or so, next month and a half, now that he's back in town. And we'll see what comes from the leader of the Conservative Party and how he delivers, how he presents, how he basically represents the country from a business vantage and represents the country as the leader of the opposition and holding Carney's feet to the fire, just like he rightfully did on that clip he just showed us. There was little showmanship in it. There was little bantering back and forth. There was little shouting from his people in behind him, cheering every second word that he says. This was a totally different leader of the opposition, and I'll tell you, even his backbenchers, a complete different facade in the House of Commons during that debate and discussion. I'm not going to say I'm surprised. I'm more of taking a position of where have you been, and if this is you, welcome, nice to see you, and let's see what happens moving forward, Gary. And you know what, we're kind of asking ourselves too, why the sudden change? Was this a political change that he needed to make for his survivability as the leader of the opposition and the Conservative Party? Did they basically sit down and say, well, what's working for Canadians? What are Canadians looking for? I think, one, he's learned that he has to be able to reach them, and the last 2 weeks he's done that. You look at him sitting for 2.5 hours with Joe Rogan, which is a pretty heavily conservative podcast, and actually it is the most popular podcast in the United States. Why go there now when he didn't go there the first time, right? Who is he trying to reach? How many Canadians actually listen to that? You'd be surprised. I dug up some numbers, Gary. I mean, in terms of his decision to go out there and really, really set the stage in terms of changing, in terms of his coming out. Let's call it a coming out party. Mm-hmm. I mean, his audience, number one in the USA, 65% of his audience is American. Second biggest chunk of his demographic carries from the UK, 8 to 12% of his audience. And lo and behold, 5 to 8% of Canadians are regular viewers of his show. You know what? 5 to 8%, that's a considerable chunk of change. And most of his demographic is between 18 and 34, right? This is the demographic base that helped win Trump the election. Maybe this is a target that he needs to go after too in Canada. Regardless, Gary, he did put on a very Canadian face. He backed his prime minister, and at the end of the day, he is his prime minister. He pretty much backed him up in terms of what he'd like to see happen for Canada, with Canada and the United States. He held himself quite well. He actually looked very prime ministerial, if I may dare, which is not something you and I have said very often. Then looking very prime ministerial. Good for him. There's hope. It's great to see. And then there's the other piece of, why is it that make those changes now? Well, you know what? If you recall, Gary, during Carney putting together Team Canada to respond to the tariff threats and Donald Trump, he couldn't invite the opposition leader to sit in that session because he had lost his seat in the Ottawa Carleton region, right? So he couldn't sit there. You know what? Maybe this is his opportunity to actually be part of Team Canada. So it's not just the prime minister and the premiers of all the provinces and territories, that this could actually include the leader of the opposition. What better way for Pierre Poilievre to get the necessary exposure through all constituencies in Canada by actively participating in Team Canada? Because at the end of the day, the more you have surrounding that table in terms of solid leadership, A, the better it is for the country, B, the better it is for you and me, and C, the better it is for Pierre Poilievre as well. So I think this entire strategy of his, whoever's giving him the necessary coaching, or he's just taking the lead and saying, this is how I want to be able to act and behave as the leader of the opposition party and the Progressive Conservative Party. This is how we're going to move forward, and the real me is going to come out. So you know what, Gary? Right now I'm looking at a win-win-win-win situation for everything that's happened the last 2 weeks for Canada, Pierre Poilievre, and his work with Prime Minister Carney. And Prime Minister Carney is no fool. He brings very competent people to the table for any discussions and any advice. And you know what? Pierre Poilievre could be a valuable resource for him as well. So I see this being as a win situation for everyone right across the board. And I'll just end by saying, will the real Pierre Poilievre stand up? And I hope this is the real Pierre Poilievre that's been presented to us the last couple of weeks.
All right, let's move over here quickly to a comment. And Monel says he may be seeing what is happening in the States and the blue wave coming. Bullying isn't working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry about that. Anyway, it may very well be that, Eddie. There was something that you said a few minutes ago, and I was going to pick up on it, and now it just escapes me. But the bottom line of it is, I think he realizes after getting the leadership review over with at the end of January and coming out with 87% support, that sent a message from at least the party itself that, we're still behind you. Mm-hmm. But he also realized when looking at the personal popularity numbers before and during the campaign and then after and up until, even now, still current, he hasn't made a dent yet. It'll be interesting to see in the next 2 weeks any of the polling that comes out, and there will be, as to has he managed to garner some momentum and now starting to pick up a bit of support, both from a party standpoint because of his trips, and also from a personal standpoint, because there's one. This is what I wanted to say. The one common theme that I have witnessed from any discussions on any of the Canadian news networks and even some podcasts that I've been watching, and that is, it didn't matter which stripe the pundits were from or leaning, they all were saying the same thing, that Poilievre did an excellent job. He looked like the prime minister of a government in waiting.
Yeah.
And that's a huge turnaround to be getting that kind of consensus from all sides.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really interesting to see, as I say, how that translates in new polling numbers in the next week or two, for sure.
Yeah. And the next in the next 4 weeks, Gary, are pretty important with the by-elections coming up and whatnot.
Yep.
We're going to get into that in segment 2, but all of this is extremely important. That's going to set the stage for Canada for the next 3.5 years, for sure, the next 3 years. But also, Gary, you also have to think, if most of these by-elections swing to the Liberal side, and that's what the expectation is, very, very slim margin for majority government. And you know what? All it takes is somebody not being available or whatnot for a motion not to be carried on the floor to have a vote of non-confidence. So, is Pierre Poilievre at this particular stage ready to head into an election based on the polling numbers you mentioned right now, Gary? No. So, if anything, the more time he is given to rebuild his profile as a prime minister, the better it is going to be for him and the Conservative Party to be a better opponent if a snap election is called for one reason or another. So it's going to be extremely, extremely interesting the next month or two, for sure, Gary.